was born in Ostrog, Poland, where there was a population of 20-odd thousand people. Out of 20,000, there were 9,000 Jews. And the rest were Poles and Ukrainians. We had a river by the name of Horing, which went by right not far from my house. We lived on the outskirts of the house where I lived. And that river was really the whole entertainment of my youth, because we used to go swimming early in May, which is very unusual, because early in May was too cold, and it was like, I dare you, get in here. And it was a lot of fun in that river. Spent my youth in Ostrog. I went to Polish and Hebrew schools and belonged to a local soccer club, sport club, played soccer. My parents were in business. We had a haberdashery store. And we also had, under the store, was a very large basement. And the reason why I want to mention that basement is because we had two hospitals. And the hospitals had no refrigeration for ice. And as you know, hospital needs ice, and so do restaurants. And no one had such a big basement. And that basement they used to use, evidently, all through the wars that used to go on between Poles and the Russians, and the Tatars, and Genghis Khan, and even there were several families of Genghis Khan's nationality. They call them the Tatars, and there was even a street by the name of Tatarska Ulica, and they had. Let me go back first to the basement, then I'll go back to the other stuff, because it's not involved in that. Anyway, what I'm saying about the ice, in wintertime, they used to go to the river and they used to break up the ice, and the ice was a foot thick, a little better than a foot thick. It was about, I don't know, they used to make it about 12 inches in square, and load it on wagons and bring it into our basement. And they had made from boards all the way down to the basement, so they used to shove that in.
How deep was the basement?
It was deep. The basement must have been, I would say, a good 3 stories high, and that's big. And
so it was cold.
It was cold in the basement, of course. And then in the summertime, they used to take it out. Whoever was in charge for the hospital used to sell the ice, you know. It wasn't like they had refrigeration. We had no refrigeration. We had outdoor toilets. Used to freeze your tussie when you go out there, you know.
Did you have toilet paper, Melvin?
We had newspapers.
And leaves, you told me.
Well, in the summertime, when we were kids, we used to run, you know, in the fields out there, because it was very open country, the outskirts near the river, so we used leaves. Since we didn't know any better, so what the hell? It was just as good. And we used to play soccer, and this was on the Polish-Russian border, you know, and there were two poles. It was a Polish and Russian pole. Red and white was Polish, and red was Russian, and the ball used to go on the other side, and we used to go and get it, and nobody said anything. In the late 1937, 1938, they made it very difficult for people who live in Ostrog, because we had an old city, we had a new city. And the new city was, in order for anybody going to the new city, you had to have a special pass. So whoever lived in the city, and where the old and new always had a pass, you could go, but any stranger couldn't even come into the city because they had to have a special pass in order to be there. But Ostrog in itself is the name Ostrog is the Russian word for fortresses, a fortress. In these fortresses, when we were kids, the teacher we went to school, the teacher used to take us, on a trip, and underground from practically the middle of the city used to be underground. They had these fortresses in each corner of the city, and it still stays to this day, all these fortresses. So it was a happy life, because up to the Russians came in September 17, 1939, it was a nice, happy life. We didn't know any better. I mean, it was okay. And when the Russians came in, they forced everyone, businessmen, to keep the stores open and to sell out everything. And they proclaimed that $1 was a ruble and a ruble was a dollar, and in actuality that the ruble was worth probably 5 cents. So my parents employed my brother and my sisters, and we used to get dressed like sweaters and all kinds of other stuff, and it wasn't the summertime, it was late in September, it was still hot, and we took it to relatives, to have them hide it, and so later on we can sell it and live on it. And because life then was very bad, because you had to stay in line for all kinds of supplies, hot and bread, sugar and everything. Sometimes the walls where you were staying in line, from rubbing against the wall, there was a line from one end to the other. And you had to get up early in the morning, when they used to say they give, it wasn't for nothing, but when they gave something, you had to go and get it. If not, tomorrow may not be. So I remember one episode, at one time they gave sugar, and people were buying so much sugar that there wasn't enough money already, right? But then all of a sudden there was no more sugar. And so if you wanted to buy sugar, you had to buy in the black market, pay 5-6 times as much. And this was going on till the war broke out between Poland and Germany, and then the Russians came in there. So my older brother was in Warsaw, and he came back. He was walking from Warsaw to Ostrog, somewhere about 250 kilometers, I believe, if not more. And he came back and he told us how the Germans treated the Jews. They put them in ghetto, they beat them up. In those days, there were no gas chambers, but they put them in ghettos. They had to pay heavy fines for just being Jews, But this thing that my brother told us about how the Germans treated Jews, it really upset me, because when the war broke out between Germany and the Soviet Union, and on June 22nd, 1941, especially the youth were thinking, not even among themselves, although all close friends we used to talk about in case we heard that this town was taken, this city was taken. We were thinking about escaping, but we couldn't go anywhere, because if we had to leave without the high officials leave before us, if they leave, we can leave. If they don't leave, we can't go, because we'll create a panic and they'll shoot you right in the spot. So we actually waited till 4 days after the war, on 26th of June. I remember it was on a Thursday. And I started packing my things, and I asked my parents and my sisters to come with me. And they didn't want to go. When I said to my parents, I said, for Pete's sake, I said, you remember what your son said when you came back from Warsaw? 1939, what the Germans did to the Jews, you still want to stay here? Oh, where we want to go? What are we going to do? And they just didn't want to go, so I hopped on my bicycle and I picked up my best bike because I had a bike shop. Picked up my best bike and I got some fresh supplies, and with another about 10 or 12 guys, friends, we left Ostrog. And we went to the following city, about 22 kilometers, and there was heavy combat between the Russians and the Germans because it was on the old Russian-Polish border, and the skies were red from artillery exchanges. And the following morning, we had to leave that other town, Slavuta, because the Germans took the town of Ostrog. And I remember that day, it was the first time I ever cried. I felt like I'll never see him again. And we walked from that Slavuta to I don't know, about maybe a day or two. Finally, they made us work in a collective farm about a week. And while we worked there, we heard that the Germans are approaching again, so we took off and we went to Kiev. And we were riding in a boat, a big boat, and all of a sudden German planes start bombarding that big boat. And we jumped, whoever had no choice. I mean, I figured I wasn't going to stay there, and neither did friends of mine. We jumped in the water on that boat, and we swam across with whatever belongings I little have. And from there we went to on the border between, it was actually like a fork. In one direction you go to southern Caucasus, which was warm in the winter time. Or you can go to the north and go into the middle of Russia, which is very, very cold. And our clothing wasn't that good, although I had a coat, a heavy coat, but still, we put it to vote and we decided to go to southern Caucasus. Now, southern Caucasus, the climate where we were there, into northern Caucasus, there's a north and the south Caucasus. The southern Caucasus was very warm. The north was, the climate was just like, it was a little cooler. And we arrived in a city that we wanted to get organized and go to work. So finally they sent us something like 50 miles away from a city, high in the mountains, to work in a collective farm. It seems that all the work they could give us are collective farms. So we stayed there for about a week, and we took off in the middle of the night because we were afraid if we took off on our own, they may arrest us. And we walked in the middle of the night because it wasn't that hot to do it. The evenings were very, very cold in the mountains, and the days were very, very hot. So when we came back, and we went to a different city, and we organized ourselves on jobs. And I remember three of my friends that we had to get up in the morning and go to work, and they still were asleep. And we left, and they said, well, we're going to get up, we're going to get up. They didn't get up, and they came to work late. And during the war times in the Soviet Union, if you come late to work, they may put you in jail for that, which they did. They put all those three friends of mine in jail for 6 months for being 10 minutes late. Great country, huh? So we worked there for about, since 1941, I would say, in June until July or June of 42, and then the Germans again started coming. That's when one army went to Stalingrad, and the other army went to the southern Caucasus. So we had to run again, and I remember I got on the last train, and I was standing on the stairs and holding on to the bars, and there were three people in front of me, and the Russian cities in that area is so remote that you can go about 50 miles from one city to the other before the train will stop. And when finally the train stopped, I couldn't open up my fingers, because that really was the last train. From there we went to Baku. Baku, this is the capital of Azerbaijan. That's where the oil fields are. Now we were told that the best thing to do is to cross the Caspian Sea into Krasnovodsk. That's Middle Asia. And while we were waiting there at the harbor, there were hundreds and hundreds of people there waiting. And they relieved themselves. There was no shame because there was no place to go. And I had a coat, and there was one time, foolishly, I said to myself, I said, gee whiz, why did I have to leave home? That's how bad it was. Really, it was cold, it was windy. Then there's a boat came with military people, and was talking to one of the officers. And he says, what are you guys waiting over here? And I said, well, we're going to go over there on the other side. He said, don't be crazy. He said, there's so many people are dying of hunger. For a glass of water, you have to pay a fortune. So if that's the case, we decided to go to the south, close to the Turkish border. And if worse comes to worse, if the Germans come that close, we can cross the border. So we went to that particular town, not too far from the Turkish border. And while I went to the city, we organized on a job. I was working also as a machinist. And during the daytime, I went outside at the station to look around, new faces. Maybe somebody came in, This was a border town. But I didn't have any passport. They took my passport away. While you were working, they always take your passport away. And as the train came down, people get out of the train, and I'm looking. I couldn't find anybody. And instead of going out to there was a door, and I saw the NKVG standing there and looking at documents. So I figured I'll go straight down on the sidewalk. Maybe I can get out without them asking me questions, where's my passport? So I felt that somebody was walking behind me, and they told me to stop and ask my identification. I said, I haven't got it. I left it in that place. So meanwhile, they took me into the police, and they questioned me, all kinds of questions. And they had some, at that time I had changed my nationality from Jewish to Polish, and my name was Michał Świętosławski. And the reason why I did that is because there was great anti-Semitism in there, so I think I'll change that name. So they interviewed me, and they asked me questions, and I told them the truth. So they took me, they transferred me to the KVG, and out there, they questioned me so much, you have no idea. And I told them the truth, that they put me in solitary, but stark naked, for 2 days, just bread and water. Finally they decided, they said, well, we have somebody over here who will recognize you from that place. And I knew there wasn't that guy. There was a KBG man who was dressed in civilian clothes. You said, I never saw you in your life. Finally, after another day, they let me go. Because they found out, they let me go. And I was so hungry when they let me out I went to the market. They had these markets in black markets, and I ate so much that
What did you get?
I had a lot of fruit, meat I ate. I couldn't stop eating. So finally, I almost fainted from eating so much. I gave it everything. I gave it everything up. And then I went back to that place, and I was working. We were working there till 1943, after the Russians have taken Stalingrad and cleared the southern Caucasus from the Germans. I went back to my old place, and I was working there till until 1944. But there's another episode which I want to mention: the life in the Soviet Union. I was working in a place as a machinist. We used to bring, they called an elevator, used to bring all the supplies from collective farms, like wheat, corn, and all that. And most naturally, whoever worked there, I was stealing, because this is a way to live. So I remember one woman who had several children, and her husband was in the army, and she walked out with pocketfuls of corn. The guard arrested her, and the prosecutor came. 6 months in jail. So there were several friends of mine that we worked together there, and we decided we have to teach that guy a lesson, because he had caught her, and she got 6 months in jail. So if they would catch us, they'd put us away for life. So we knew that he had a family of 6 children, and he and his wife makes it 8, and the money that he was making could last him maybe for half a day. So he was stealing too. So we decided we are going to watch him for a whole week until we catch him. So we watched him, and we caught him. We beat the living daylights out of him, and we were going to kill him right there on the spot. So he was begging us. He said, "You can take anything you want next time. I'm going to look the other side. I'm not going to say anything." Anyway, from then on, it was free ride. We did everything we wanted to do. And he kept his mouth shut. While I was in running water in southern Caucasus, I got a letter from my sister. And when I saw that letter, and I opened it up, I couldn't read it because I was choking with tears. And I had to give it to somebody else to read my letter. Well, and that letter was a very short letter written, and it said in brief that our whole family of about 60 people, maybe a dozen were alive, and she told me more or less how my parents were executed. In October of that same year, 1944, I took off from southern Caucasus to meet my sisters, and my director told me not to go because he said it's almost the end of the war, and over here you can stay and work till the end of the war, because I had a pass that they couldn't take me into service because I was a machinist. However, blood is thicker than water, and I said I'm going to go regardless. I got all my documents ready, and I left. I met my sisters. There was a lot of joy, crying, and all that. And from there we went to Zdolbunov. This is a city not far from my hometown. And the reason why I went to Zdolbunov because I also worked on the railroad. And while times were not that good because I had to live on my salary, and there was no time to go out and do any speculation on the black market, because I couldn't, to steal, there was nothing to steal. To steal steel, you can't get anything from steel. When I was working in mineral water in Caucasus, I could steal flour, corn, all that stuff, and I sold it in the market, and I had plenty of money left over. However, we went by, we lived like everybody else. It wasn't good, but what the hell. When the war was over, they had us, they told us, all those who were born in Poland prior to 1939, if they want to leave from the Soviet Union to Poland, they can go. So we packed all of us and we left for Poland. We came to a big city. The name of the city was Lodz. And we were staying there in a one-room apartment. And my sisters, they worked, and I went to Germany to do business. I don't want to go into the details what kind of a business I did. However, business it was, because it's not flattering what I did. And going back to the time when I came to see my sisters, and we had a long talk, and they told us exactly what happened when the Germans came into my town, Ostrog. The first time the Germans came in, they gathered all the Jews and they put them in a ghetto with the help of good citizens, the Ukrainians, which they helped exterminate the Jews in our city and anywhere else in Poland. The first thing they did is they took all the people, and the graves were already dug out by the Ukrainians, and they marched them in out of town. They shot them and they buried them. Next thing, they took all the able-bodied men and women. They left it for later. At that time, when they took the elderly people, my parents were hiding in one of our relatives' attic. And they lived through the first action, what we call the action, because there were 3 of them. The second action was they took youngsters, and they took them also out of town, and with the help of our good neighbors, the Ukrainians, they shot them and they killed them. Then, all that time, after that second action, after any action was over, they could come out of their hiding because there were more Jews they allowed to live, and they lived in the ghetto. However, then came a third action, which that was already the extermination of all the Jews in the ghetto. And my father and my mother, both of my sisters, my aunt, and a cousin, and another cousin who had a little baby about 6 months old, they took a closet. Closets back home weren't like over here, they were built in. Those closets were portable. You could move them around, it was one piece. And under the closet, they got a big hole, and they push, once they all got in that hole, sitting there with their knees bent, there was no other way how to even move, and sit there, and they pull the closet on top over that hole. Well, we lived there not far from the water, from a river, so at night we could go out and get some water. Not we, excuse me. They could go out and get some water. However, at that time when they were very thirsty, and the baby especially was crying and she wanted some water, so my father had to give the baby urine to drink in order to keep the little baby quiet. Otherwise, you had to keep your hand over the mouth. There were people walking around upstairs robbing whatever was left. And by keeping the hand over your mouth, the baby could have suffocated. So in order for the baby not to suffocate, they had to give the urine to drink. And then according to my sisters, what they told me, my father already was off his rocker. Anybody who wanted to get out of that hole, they had to knock 3 times and say in German permission to get out of the hole. But my sister decided they can't sit any longer. My parents were not in a position to leave. So they get out, and if they get caught, they get caught in a shot rather than suffocate in the little hole. But my older sister was a school teacher, and she had plenty of Ukrainians who she taught in school, and they used to come in our house from the villages, and they stayed over our house. My mother, they used to feed them, and they used to sleep and everything. So she decided, my sister decided to go one of those villages where she knew all those people who used to come to our house. Out of all of the people, maybe one let him stay overnight, and early in the morning they gave him some food and they threw him out. The others they went to, they said, we're not going to turn you in, and you're lucky. The only thing we can do is you got to leave right away. If you're not going to leave, we're going to let the dogs loose on you. Mind you, people who used to come to our house, drink and eat and sleep, and a common thing like that, to stay overnight, they wouldn't even let him. Okay, we were in Poland. When we got to Poland, we were there for about, I would say, about 4 months. And from Poland, we left as Greek Jews. And we had a course in Greek for about 2 weeks, and that's all we could say several sentences, not too much. We couldn't converse, but we could understand a little bit here and there. And we were told when we leave that city or lodge, we leave as Greek Jews came out of the concentration camp, going back to Greece. When we got to the Polish-Czechoslovakian border, the Polish military police took us down from the train into the station. And as they took us down and they asked us, they talked to us, and we said everything in German, a few words, that we are Greek, and we go back to Greece. So one Polish officer said in Polish, "Wsia krew to są polskie Żydzi," meaning a bad word in Polish, that these are the dirty Jews. But they didn't bother us. They were happy that we leave, and they let us go. And we went on a train, and we went on the way to Czechoslovakia. And we always had it in mind what we were told before we left Poland, that under no circumstances should we speak any language, either Russian, Polish, or Jewish, because they might catch us and send us back. While we were on the train, there was was a Russian officer, and he started talking to us, and we told him, we spoke to them in Hebrew, and not that we knew Hebrew, we knew we could understand a few words, but we were told any time that somebody talks to you, you should say like a prayer in Hebrew. And I remember my older sister, he was talking to my older sister, my sister said something in Hebrew that says in the Bible, and he said Amen in Hebrew, the Russian officer. But still, we wouldn't give in. And he begged us to, he says, don't be afraid, I know that you are Jews. Nobody said anything. Finally, as soon as we got to Czechoslovakia, Bratislava, Czechoslovakia, that's the capital of Slovakia, already people were waiting for us from these organizations. They put us up in a hotel, and we were staying there for a few days, and from there we went to Austria as Austrian Jews with false passports. We went to for Austrian Jews, and we had to, and this, you mustn't forget that this was still Russian occupation territory. Czechoslovakia as well as that part of Austria where we are supposed to go. So, but we didn't encounter anything bad as far as arresting us or anything like from the Russians. It just looked the other way, I suppose. And we came to Vienna. We came to Vienna. There was a big building that the Rothschild used to own, and it was called the Rothschild Spital, meaning hospital, Rothschild Hospital. And we were there for about several weeks. From there, we went to. They took us already under the American military. They took us to a place, Bad Gastein, that's way in the mountains near the Swiss border. That was a resort place. Boy, would I like to go there now. Gorgeous place, waterfall skiing year round, you know, and all that. And they put us up in a hotel. So we were there in about, I say about 3 years. Then they moved us to Linz, and that wasn't as nice as the hotels. And there were former SS barracks. So we were there for about another year and a half. We registered to come to the United States. And
what did you do during all that?
didn't do anything. We just bought and sold. We went to different cities, buy things, and come back and sell it. You know, this is how we live, because that's all they gave us, is 800 calories a day to live on. And nobody can live on 800 calories. However, the place that we were there, Bad Gastein, it was such a beautiful place that summer and winter we used to go skiing there. It was gorgeous. But in 1949 we got our papers and we came to the United States. February the 2nd, I came to the United States February 2nd, 1949. It was very tough to begin at the beginning, not knowing the language, going to work. My former profession I couldn't because of the language barrier. So I found a job that wasn't too much speaking of English, and I became a cloth cutter, then a dress cutter. Then I met my wife Mary at a dance. That was in 1952 or 53, I believe. And at a hotel, Menga, there was dances every Saturday night. So her girl, she didn't have a date, and her girlfriend didn't have a date. So her girlfriend pulled her out and said, "Let's go dancing to the Menga Hotel." So she went, and Jerry and I used to go there regularly, so we went there too, and that's where I met Meg. And after a year of courtship, we got married. And we produced two beautiful children, Floshes and Chaloshes and Leffel. Well, this is the end of my autobiography. However, I would like to say a few words that the Jewish people gave Christianity a religion, and they sure as hell didn't go by that, because nobody lifted a finger to help the Jews. I shouldn't say nobody. A very, very small portion of the Russian and the Ukrainian and Polish population helped the Jews out. I hope in the future Christians and Jews should God that such a thing should never happen again. And this is the end of my mini autobiography. Bye, Flushes!